The anime begins in a small town where most of the inhabitants despise demihumans. In the midst of this hostile environment, we meet Benaza, a merchant with a heart of gold who, unlike the others, treats everyone with respect, regardless of their species. Benaza is busy preparing goods for his next delivery, and in an act of kindness, he offers money to the demi-human helping him, suggesting he use it to eat while they wait. At first, the demi-human is reluctant to accept it due to the rejection he faces for being who he is. However, Benaza's persistence and kindness, backed by his companion Quinn, convince him to accept the help. Meanwhile, the other humans look at Benaza with disdain, criticizing his equal treatment of the disgusting creatures. But Benaza stands firm, convinced that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity regardless of their background. Suddenly, Benaza begins to glow and, without warning, disappears. Confused, he finds himself in an unfamiliar place where he is greeted by a priest who welcomes him to the Magical Kingdom of Klyrode. The priest informs him that he has been summoned as the 198th hero, destined to fight against the fearsome Dark Army. Benaza, shocked and bewildered, tries to explain to the priest that he is just a merchant, and has no idea why he was chosen. But his words fall on deaf ears, and the priest proceeds to evaluate his abilities with a magical orb. Although Benaza starts at level 1, he is told that the gods have blessed him with special abilities known as Divine Revelation. However, when a wolf woman conducts the assessment, she discovers that Benaza does not possess any extraordinary abilities. His stats are those of an ordinary person. Disappointment fills the room. Ashamed, Benaza asks to be returned to his world, but his request is ignored. Next to him, another hero is summoned, and this one possesses legendary powers with maximum stats, sparking euphoria among those present. The king names the blonde as the savior of the kingdom, while Benaza is ignored, leaving him frustrated and feeling out of place in this new world. To get rid of him, the guards put him in a carriage and send him to the Delevza Forest, an isolated place north of the kingdom, as compensation for not being able to return him to his world. During the long 20-day journey, Benaza tries to talk to the coachman, but he refuses, explaining that he has orders not to interact with him. With little success in obtaining information about this new world, Benaza finally resigns himself to his fate. When he arrives at the Delevza Forest, he is given a magical bag containing money, food, weapons, and farming tools. However, upon inspecting it, Benaza realizes that the bag is enchanted with tracking spells, monster attraction, and forced recovery, which explains why he was attacked by some slimes upon arrival. Although he manages to defeat them, his sword breaks in the process. After the fight, Benaza is surprised to see that his stats have increased dramatically, suspecting that the king sent him into a trap to get rid of him. But his luck changes when the guiding voice of his system informs him that he can remove the spells from the bag, which he quickly does. Determined to find a safe place, Benaza tries to venture into the forest, but the guiding voice warns him that the place has a high concentration of malice, dangerous for humanoids. Instead of retreating, Benaza decides to purify the forest, using a large amount of his magic in the process. Surprisingly, the forest is completely purified, and Benaza levels up to 367 without having faced any monsters. Meanwhile, in the kingdom, the king's daughter scolds her father for sending Benaza to the Delevza Forest, a place rumored to be inhabited by the Dark Army. The king, however, feels satisfied for having disposed of what he considers a human waste. But his calm fades when he learns that someone has used purification magic, the highest level sacred spell. At first, he believes it was the blonde hero, but is confused to learn that the purification occurred in a distant forest to the north. Back in the forest, Benaza, now incredibly powerful, decides to enter the city using a new ability that allows him to change form. Transformed into a woman, he teleports to the royal capital, a spell reserved only for the most powerful mages in his former world. There, he registers at the Adventurers Guild under the name Fleo, in honor of his dog from his previous life. While searching for a mission on the notice board, he hears a young girl asking for help to escort her to the Delevza Forest. No one accepts her request due to the danger and lack of funds, but Fleo offers to help her, surprising everyone when he mentions they can get there quickly using his teleportation magic. This provokes the distrust of Balirasa, a royal knight, who suspects Fleo's intentions and accuses him of trying to kidnap the girl. To prove his good faith, Fleo uses his magic and transports 4 female soldiers named Balirasa, Blossom, Bolano, and Bilary to the Delevza Forest in an instant, leaving the girls stunned. One of them, a mage, asks if he is a high-level sorcerer, but Fleo modestly responds that he is just a novice adventurer with some magic. Balirasa apologizes for being discourteous, and the other girls follow suit. Already in the forest, the girl mentions that there used to be a great amount of malice in the place, but now it is completely purified. Fleo tries to tell her that he was the one who purified it, but the guiding voice warns him that it would be dangerous to reveal such information. Suddenly, the girl reveals her true form. She transforms into Fenris, a huge creature, and Wolf's sister, one of the 4 infernals. Fenris threatens to devour them all, but Fleo uses his teleportation magic to save the girls, taking them back to the city. Fenris, impressed by Fleo's power, asks why he decided to stay. Fleo, determined to protect others, prepares for battle, ready to face any challenge in this new and dangerous world. Fleo, burdened by the weight of uncertainty, found himself facing the mighty Fenris, a creature whose abilities surpassed those of any magical beast. The question that lingered in his mind was inevitable: why him, of all beings in this world, had been chosen to face such a formidable opponent. Despite his doubts, Fleo was not willing to fall without a fight. With the determination of someone who refuses to resign to an imposed fate, he prepared to unleash every spell he had learned since arriving in this world. Fenris, aware of the threat, dodged Fleo's initial attack with agility that clearly demonstrated her combat experience. However, she couldn't anticipate the young man's quick response, as he conjured a wall of stones that trapped her. Without giving her time to react, he used a powerful gravity spell that left her incapacitated. The system guiding Fleo suggested using subjugation magic to control Fenris. A creature of such power could be a valuable ally under his command. But Fleo, recalling his previous life, instantly rejected the idea. He couldn't repeat the mistakes of the past. Subjugating a living being against its will was something he couldn't live with. Fenris, trapped and weakened, exhausted all her magic in an effort to free herself. But in the end, she understood she was defeated. Exhausted, she asked Fleo to end her life once and for all. However, he had no intention of killing her. Battles, for Fleo, were merely a last resort. He dispelled the gravity magic, releasing her, and Fenris, astonished, found herself free when she least expected it. Confused by the unexpected mercy, Fenris shed her beastly form, revealing her human appearance. Realizing her vulnerability, Fleo quickly covered her with his cloak, a gesture of kindness that further bewildered the creature. He asked her to promise not to fight against humans again, and in return, he would let her go freely. While Fleo searched for some clothes in his magical bag, Fenris, exhausted by the lack of magic and the emotions of the battle, fell asleep. Later, as Fleo reviewed the numerous spells he possessed, he wondered why he had access to such powerful magic. When Fenris awoke, she found him keeping watch over their surroundings. Despite her resistance to magic, she had always considered humans to be fragile beings. Intrigued, she asked if he had used healing magic on her while she was unconscious, to which Fleo nodded, stating it was necessary to save her. Fenris, impressed by the effectiveness of the healing, confessed that anyone else in his position would have killed her without hesitation. Moved by Fleo's compassion, Fenris made a vow. Given her immense power, she proclaimed him her master and decided to dedicate her life to repaying the debt she felt she owed him. Despite Fleo's attempts to refuse her, Fenris insists, calling him master and promising to do anything for him, with the only condition being that he allowed her to stay by his side. Fleo, unable to dissuade her, reluctantly accepted, concerned about the implications of his new situation. A while later, Fleo confessed to Fenris that he wasn't from this world, revealing that he had been summoned as a hero candidate, but they had abandoned him in the forest after deeming him useless. He showed her his true appearance and explained that he had changed his form out of fear of being hunted by the castle's people. With no place to go or a clear purpose in his life, Fleo was lost. But Fenris, unwavering, explained the law of the wolves, to live for those they recognize as their master, regardless of who they are or where they come from. With unshakable determination, Fenris promised him eternal loyalty, not caring about the difficulties they might face together. Meanwhile, at the royal castle, the king questioned the hero about what had happened during the siege. The hero, a pathetic figure despite his title, blamed the soldiers for the failure, claiming they had cowered before a mere magical beast. But the king, suspicious, interrogated one of his soldiers, who revealed that the hero had remained at the rear, giving orders and blaming others for his own incompetence. Frustrated by his inability to improve, despite a whole month of training, the hero could only face humans or low-ranking magical beasts. Disillusioned and seeking solace, he retired with one of his servants, Suya, to squander the royal funds. Back in the city, Fleo and Fenris headed to the Adventurers Guild, hoping to register and earn some money. A merchant addressed Fenris as lady, which surprised her. Fleo remarked that they probably thought they were married, and Fenris, blushing, accepted the idea with enthusiasm. However, Fleo clarified that they would only pretend to be married, though Fenris didn't seem inclined to take the relationship lightly. Inside the guild, Fenris observed with curiosity the methods humans use to store information. Fleo, displaying his magic, showed her that he could do the same. Fenris recalled her race's tradition, where the marriage rite consisted of the couple eating the bones of the prey they hunted together, symbolizing their union. While Fleo hoped Fenris wouldn't force him to follow that strange tradition, the guild receptionist announced an emergency. A group of psycho bears had been sighted to the north and were heading towards the city. The adventurers, frightened by rumors that these bears had annihilated the hero's army, listened intently to the offer of a reward multiplied tenfold. Although Fleo thought it would be better not to get involved, Fenris insisted that it would be an easy task for him. Determined not to leave her alone, Fleo accompanied her to the place where the psycho bears had been sighted, near the house the guild had provided them. Fenris, showing great resolve, prepared to finish off the bears. Fleo, seeing her determination, decided to fight by her side. The cavalry, already beaten earlier, was on the verge of defeat, but Fleo intervened, launching a lightning attack that obliterated most of the bears, while Fenris eliminated the last one with a devastating stomp. The knights thanked Fleo for saving them, while Fenris, offended by a comment about the fragility of humans, questioned the lack of respect towards her master. Suddenly, a much larger psycho bear appeared, a towering threat, but Fenris, using an unknown ability, completely subdued it. Though no one understood what she had done, Fenris suggested they tame the bear. Fleo, to avoid panic, transformed it into a small colicker, an inoffensive creature. The knights, impressed by his power, begged Fleo to become their leader, as the hero had proven incapable of leading his troops. Fleo, trying to decline the offer, was convinced by Fenris, who now, calmer after marking her territory, suggested he accept the role. Finally, Fleo agreed, though he warned them he wasn't a good teacher. The girls, excited, thanked him and requested to stay at the house, which delighted Fenris, who saw this as an opportunity to spend more time alone with her master. Meanwhile, in the Dark Kingdom, Uluminas informed the Dark Lord that Hen Rise's unit had been annihilated by a single man, someone who wielded purification magic of immeasurable power. Concerned, the Dark Lord ordered them to find and capture the mysterious individual at all costs. The next day, Fleo wakes up to the intense gaze of Rise, who was watching over his dreams. Startled, he asks her what she's doing in his room, to which she casually replies that it's obvious. They are married, so it's normal for them to be together. Fleo, confused, recalls the previous night when Rise invited him to lie beside her, offering him her body and soul. However, Fleo, nervous, refused. Now, Rise, slightly wounded in her pride, asks him if he has already started to hate her, if the love has ended after just 2 days of marriage. Fleo, surprised, tells her it's not that, but rather that he prefers to take his time and mentally prepare himself. Rise, frustrated, doesn't understand what there is to prepare for something so natural, and gives him a few slaps to wake him up. Human relationships seem too complicated for her, but Fleo remains firm in his decision. He decides to sleep in the hallway, but Rise reminds him that if the other girls see him sleeping there, they might start to suspect something about their relationship. In a desperate attempt, Rise lunges at him to strip off his pajamas, but at that moment, Ballyrossa enters and misunderstands the situation. The girls' training begins, and Fleo watches in despair at how pathetic it turns out to be. However, thanks to Rise's instructions and his own patience, they manage to improve a little. Fleo realizes that training them will be quite a challenge, but he doesn't give up. With the reward obtained for defeating the psycho bears, Fleo buys a house so the girls don't have to keep sleeping on the floor. The girls, grateful, receive the news just as Rise informs them that dinner is ready. However, the meat they've prepared seems to still be alive. Fleo, concerned, suggests cooking it himself, but Ballyrossa steps in to help, and after a while of preparation, the meal is ready. The girls, surprised by the delicious feast, ask Fleo if he used magic to prepare it. Fleo responds that he's just an amateur cook and that Ballyrossa lent a hand. Rise, who initially despised vegetables, is forced to try them when she learns that Fleo prepared them. To her surprise, she is delighted by the taste and admits that cooking isn't as easy as she thought. The next day, Fleo and the girls go out to sell boar meat at the guild, and word quickly spreads about their impressive hunting skills. While everyone is watching, Rise asks Fleo to take a walk through the city, but he declines her company, saying he has personal matters to attend to. Lilith, the guild master, approaches Fleo and tells him that the whole city is talking about his exploits, and he has even received a request from the king for Fleo to put his strength at the service of the kingdom's hero. Lilith mentions that the king is willing to name him an honorary knight if he accepts, but Fleo isn't interested in the offer and declines. Back with Fleo, he finds Rise tired and covered in ashes, and asks if she fought some magical beast. Rise confesses that her true enemy was the kitchen, which she ended up burning in her attempt to learn how to cook to win Fleo's heart. Meanwhile, Suya, another of the girls, hears rumors about a warrior who might help in the fight against the Dark Lord and suggests they recruit him as their right hand. A month later, a carriage from the castle arrives at Fleo's house, but he continues to reject the king's offer. Rise, somewhat annoyed, comments that the emissaries don't give up, as they've come several times in the past month trying to recruit him. Rise suggests scaring them off so they stop bothering, but Fleo calms her down, saying they're just doing their duty. Later, Fleo watches the girls training and realizes that, although they've improved a little, they still have a lot to learn. During the training, Fleo gives a magic ring to Valino, one of the girls, to increase her power. However, Rise warns her not to put it on her ring finger, as that would symbolize a commitment. Suddenly, Ballyrossa is attacked by a giant caterpillar, but Rise, with ease, takes care of it, accusing her of pretending to be weak to steal her husband. But the situation becomes more tense when Ulaminas, a former ally of the Dark Lord, appears, surprised to see Rise, known as Fenris, living among humans and married. Ulaminas challenges Fleo to a fight, convinced that he is a threat to the Dark Lord's army. Fleo, though hesitant, accepts the challenge and quickly demonstrates his immense power, defeating Ulaminas with ease. The next day, Fleo apologizes to the girls for not having told them the whole truth, but they, grateful for everything Rise has taught them, decide not to betray him. However, peace doesn't last long. Ulaminas returns, this time accompanied by a group of elite dragons, ready to destroy them if they don't join the Dark Lord's army. But Fleo, excited to see real dragons, defeats them with a single spell, astonishing everyone. Blossom, one of the girls, seizes the opportunity to earn the title of Dragon Slayer by launching a tool improved by Fleo that takes down one of the dragons. Meanwhile, the Dark Lord watches from afar, surprised that a mere adventurer can wield such power. He knows he must prepare for the next step, as Fleo has become a serious threat to his reign. Fleo, in an attempt to keep his loved ones safe, placed a magical barrier around the house, capable of detecting the presence of demons. The barrier glowed with a faint blue light, a glow that inspired a sense of security in those under its protection. As he worked, Rise watched him from a distance, with a mix of concern and admiration. Despite her strong and stern character, Rise couldn't help but be intrigued by Fleo's kind and compassionate nature, especially when it came to the cat that had caused them so much trouble. One afternoon, while they were enjoying a moment of peace, Rise gave Fleo a serious look and warned him that if that cat got into trouble again, she would be the one to teach it a lesson. But though her words were harsh, inside she wondered why Fleo continued to be so considerate towards the cat, even after it had attacked them. Fleo's response was evasive. His gaze drifted to the horizon, remembering Ulamina's words, who held him responsible for Fengari's death. Although he didn't share these thoughts with Rise, she could sense that something was troubling him, but chose not to press him further. In another corner of the world, Blossom celebrated her recent acquisition of a prestigious title, one envied by the other girls. However, Bolano, always the voice of reason, reminded her that this title carried great historical weight, as the legendary sword that accompanied it had decapitated a fearsome dragon in ancient times. While Blossom enjoyed her new status, Ballyrossa silently withdrew, apparently focused on her training. But in reality, her heart was filled with sadness. She too had wished to obtain the title of Dragon Slayer, an achievement that could have restored her family's lost status. One afternoon, while venturing into the forest in search of magical beasts, Ballyrossa was interrupted by a stranger in light armor. Distrustful, she raised her sword, ready to defend herself, but the stranger, in a calm voice, explained that he was merely looking for Fenris. The tension in the air dissipated when the man, who inexplicably resembled the Dark Lord, introduced himself as Gozel. Despite her initial suspicions, Ballyrossa decided to lower her guard and let him continue on his way, though a lingering unease accompanied her back to the camp. Upon arrival, she was greeted by her companions, who asked if everything was all right, as the anti-demon barrier had been activated. Still a bit nervous, Ballyrossa recounted what had happened, causing Rise to burst into laughter at the mention of the name Gozel. What a name for someone who pretends to be important, she mocked. But her laughter quickly faded when she realized that they had actually been speaking with the Dark Lord himself. Panic seized Ballyrossa as she realized she had pointed her sword at such a powerful figure. The next day, the Dark Lord, Gozel, appeared before Fleo and Rise. Although the atmosphere was thick with tension, Fleo invited him in, trying to remain calm. Balirasa, still in shock, was forced to sit beside him, her heart pounding. Without preamble, Gozel expressed his desire to recruit Fleo into his army. However, Fleo immediately declined the offer, leading Gozel to question why. As a human, he didn't serve the king of Klyrode, who would surely want someone of his power. Rise, always ready to intervene, explained that Fleo had no interest in war, partly because he wasn't originally from this world, and partly because he simply didn't want to get involved in the conflict. Gozel, in a more reflective tone, explained that the war between demons and humans had begun 500 years ago when the first Dark Lord, also from another world, led the oppressed demons into rebellion. Over time, hatred and resentment had grown, fueling an endless conflict. When Fleo asked if he wished to end the war, Gozel responded with a mix of resignation and determination. After 12 generations of Dark Lords, the ideology had changed, and although he wasn't interested in world domination, he also couldn't allow a threat to demons to fall into human hands. Thus, he continued to press his offer, but Fleo remained firm in his decision. The pressure of the situation proved too much for Balirasa, who fainted, while the girls secretly watched, worried for everyone's safety. Despite Fleo's refusal, Gozel didn't seem upset. In fact, he was intrigued by the human's calmness before him, as well as by the peculiarity of Balirasa, who, in her own way, fascinated him. The following days were chaotic for Balirasa. Every morning, upon waking, she found the Dark Lord sharing the table with Fleo, and the others behaving like any other guests. Despite her efforts to maintain composure, simply seeing him made her nervous. Gozel, always courteous, greeted her and commented on Fenris's excellent cooking, but his constant presence unnerved her. In a burst of courage, Balirasa demanded that he leave and stop insisting on recruiting her husband. But Gozel merely smiled and asked her to sit down and eat with them, prompting Balirasa to flee to change her clothes, hoping that by the time she returned, he would be gone. However, his persistence only grew, and on several occasions, she found him watching her train outside, though in reality, she was merely trying to escape him. A soldier from the kingdom, who had been spying on the situation, reported to the king of Klyrode that a demon had been frequenting Fleo's house. Alarmed, the king interpreted this as a sign of treason and ordered his soldiers to prepare for an attack. However, the princess, with more prudence, warned that an attack could push Fleo directly into the arms of the Dark Lord. She suggested first speaking with him to understand his intentions, but the king, in his arrogance, dismissed her advice, accusing her of not being qualified to make such important decisions. The kingdom's hero, not understanding the gravity of the situation, requested a larger contingent of soldiers to force Fleo to join them, or else eliminate him. Upon arriving at Fleo's house, the blonde-haired hero, confident in his power, once again offered him the option to join their cause, but Fleo, maintaining his peaceful stance, categorically rejected him. The girls, who had grown close to Fleo, supported his decision, expressing that since they had been living with him and Rise, they had begun to question whether it was really worth fighting the demons. They decided to accompany him in his decision to leave, and in an impressive display of magic, Fleo teleported not only the girls and the house, but also all the fields, leaving the blonde hero and his soldiers dumbfounded by such a demonstration of power. Enraged, the hero informed the king of Fleo's escape, prompting the monarch to order his troops to attack Klyrode's magical headquarters. Meanwhile, Ulaminas, watching from the shadows, reveled in the chaos that was unfolding. Fleo, for his part, settled in lands near Hado, a city to the west of the capital, where he hoped to live in peace. There, he apologized to Rise for dragging her into this situation, but she assured him that as long as they were together, everything would be fine. Meanwhile, the Dark Lord's army advanced relentlessly, destroying everything in its path. The king, desperate, gathered the kingdom's mages to cast a powerful purification spell, but the tension in the air was palpable. The pathetic hero, now fearful of the consequences of his actions, hid in the southern fortress, far from danger. The spy soldier reported to his leader that the preparations were ready, and before the purification spell could affect his troops, Gozel ordered a strategic retreat. Meanwhile, in his new home, Fleo enjoyed the tranquility, although he still felt the weight of the decisions he had made. While Fleo and his group were enjoying a cup of tea in their peaceful little house, a small chat arose about their business skills. Fleo admitted that he hadn't had much luck in business in the bustling city of Hado, where it seemed there was a shop on every corner. Meanwhile, the group's archer dreamed of becoming a horse breeder. According to her, renting horses for cart pulling could be a goldmine. Fleo, ever practical, offered her the stables out back, but Bolano and Balirasa felt a bit useless because they didn't believe they had any special talents. Rise, Fleo's devoted wife, reassured them not to worry. As the group's leader, she was more than happy to take care of them, even if they felt a bit useless. However, Fleo, somewhat nervous, suggested they share the household chores and focus on practicing swordsmanship and magic, leaving domestic tasks as a secondary concern. While all this was happening, in the royal palace, the high command was breathing a sigh of relief, believing they had kept the demons at bay with a purification spell. However, they had only 3 months before the effect would wear off. The kingdom's mages, exhausted after expending all their magic, had fallen unconscious, including the king, and would not awaken for a couple of months. The princess assumed control of the kingdom as dictated by the law of Klyrode, and I must say, she seemed much more competent than her father. Her first order as interim queen was to dismiss the blonde hero from the kingdom, a man who had been hiding instead of helping to confront the Dark Lord. When one of the counselors asked how she planned to fight without the hero, she merely sighed and ordered the oracle to be summoned, seeking any advice that could save the kingdom. Meanwhile, the blonde hero in question was outside the palace, expelled and full of indignation. He was furious about how he had been treated, especially since it was the king who had put him in that position. Despite his complaints, all he received were his belongings thrown over the wall, leaving him alone and angry in the middle of the night. Back home, Fleo thanked Rise for all her work since they moved to their new home. Rise, ever loyal, assured him she would do anything for him. But before they could continue talking, Rise fell asleep, leaving Fleo reflecting on how he used to feel lonely in that world before he had a home and a family. The next day, the group's girls, in an effort to give Fleo and Rise some time alone, insisted on taking over all the household chores so the couple could go out and enjoy the day. Fleo, somewhat blushing, accepted the proposal. Rise, excited to spend time with her husband, took advantage of the opportunity to stroll through the city. After a good meal at a restaurant, they headed to the market, where Fleo decided to buy her a gift. After searching for a while, he chose a brooch, and seeing the joy on Rise's face, he knew he had made the right decision. Back home, Rise couldn't stop admiring her new accessory, which sparked a bit of envy among the other girls. That night, Rise snuggled up to Fleo in bed, making him somewhat nervous. Despite trying to ignore her, Rise hugged him, causing Fleo to have a somewhat restless night. Meanwhile, the self-proclaimed hero was plotting something in the darkness of the castle. The blonde could not bear the idea of being a mere mortal in this world. He needed more power. And while desperately searching for something to make him stronger, he heard a voice promising to grant him any wish if he released it. Following the voice's instructions, blonde hero found a sword and, upon unsheathing it, released a genie named Haya, who controlled light and darkness. Haya offered him 3 wishes, and the blonde, with unbridled ambition, revealed his dark desires. The next day, the oracle met with the princess, who explained the gravity of the situation. Suddenly, a sacrificial necklace appeared around the necks of the princess and all those present. The oracle revealed that it was the work of a genie, released by someone who had broken the seal that kept it imprisoned. The princess, knowing the situation was desperate, ordered that the true hero, who according to the oracle was already in this world, be found. Everyone assumed it was an adventurer the king had tried to recruit, and the princess decided to go in person to find him. Meanwhile, Fleo was negotiating at the market, impressing a merchant with a shield made of dragon scales. The merchant, fascinated, asked for more goods and promised to introduce him to other interested buyers. The girls, watching from afar, realized that Fleo had a real talent for commerce, which wasn't surprising since he used to be a merchant in his old world. Rise, delighted to see Fleo in action, joked with Balirasa about how lucky she was to have him as a husband. Balirasa, a bit jealous, admitted that she would like to find someone like Fleo, although Rise reminded her that she already had Gozel, who was completely in love with her. Suddenly, Fleo received an alert in his system about the presence of a genie. Haya appeared, revealing that the blonde hero's first wish was for Haya to kill Fleo for having humiliated him. Haya launched an attack, but Fleo's self-defense magic activated. However, Rise instinctively stepped in and took the hit. Desperate, Fleo tried to heal her, but his magic didn't work. In the midst of the battle, Haya caused a massive explosion, but Fleo's defenses remained intact. Despite everything, Rise was still gravely injured, and Fleo, desperate, searched for any spell that could save her. Fleo, the calm warrior, rarely got angry, but when he did, well, let's just say it's best not to be in his way. After receiving a notification informing him that he had mastered the origin of light and darkness, his fury knew no bounds. He carefully laid Rise down, vowing to take revenge on Haya. As his mind replays all the moments shared with Rise, his power erupts literally. He turns back time and heals his beloved's wounds. Rise, perplexed, cannot believe that a mere human like Fleo has turned back time with magic. But before she can process it, Fleo lands a punch on Haya that makes her bleed. She, a powerful genie, is outraged. How can a simple human strike her like that? But Fleo, with a cold and calculating look, orders her to shut up. Haya, desperate, tries to use the origin of darkness, but Fleo nullifies it as if it were child's play. He lifts her by the head, while Haya, using her evaluation ability, discovers something terrifying. Fleo possesses infinite abilities. And then, Fleo's revenge begins, a beating that even the toughest warrior would envy. Meanwhile, Rise awakens and discovers, to her astonishment, that she doesn't have a single scratch. Balirosa suggests that it's surely thanks to Fleo's magic, as both watch him give Haya an unforgettable lesson. Though Rise is impressed to see her beloved so relentless, she remembers that Fleo doesn't like to fight, let alone kill. She knows he's doing it for her, not out of pleasure. After the beating, Fleo grabs Haya by the neck, ready to deliver the final blow. Haya, terrified, begs for forgiveness, but Fleo is not willing to forgive someone who hurt Rise so easily. Just as he's about to send her to the afterlife, Rise intervenes, asking him to stop. Seeing Fleo's fury makes her realize how lucky she is. At that moment, Fleo regains his composure. He doesn't want to lose his kindness because of anyone. Tenderly, he takes Rise's face and tells her how much he appreciates her, relieved that she's okay. Meanwhile, the princess, with the help of some mages, teleports to the region where Fleo is, though she apologizes for making the mages expend their magic on teleportation. They assure her that it's for a noble cause. If they had more magical energy, they would accompany her to the next city. The princess orders her soldiers to protect the mages and ensure they find the true hero. At that moment, the sacrificial collar that everyone wears disappears, indicating that the genie has failed in her mission. On the other hand, in the castle, the guards demand that the blonde hero come out of hiding, while his assistant warns him that if they are captured, they will be executed. At that moment, a mysterious voice is surprised to hear that the genie has failed. A shadow invades the assistant's body, possessing him, and reveals that he will finally be able to emerge to the surface thanks to the genie's failure. With a change of attire, the assistant is now Dominator, the great mage of darkness, ready to grant the power the hero so desired. Then, an earthquake shakes the place, and the hero, transformed into a monstrous beast, destroys the castle walls. Dominator mocks his new appearance, much better than the silly face he had before. Both head to the surface to punish the nobles who sealed Dominator in the past. As they emerge, Dominator notices a teleportation magic circle but has no intention of letting the royalty who sealed her escape, nor their descendants. Fleo, for his part, uses his magic to heal Haya's wounds. Upon awakening, Haya, still frightened, asks for forgiveness. After a while, she asks Fleo how it's possible that she's unharmed. He calmly responds that it's because Rise is safe. Balirosa asks what they should do with Haya, as neither the knights nor the city's forces can stop her. Fleo suggests returning her to the castle and sealing her again, surprising Haya, who asks how he knows so much. Fleo explains that he now has access to more spells and has discovered the truth in his mind. All of this is the hero's fault. Haya, shocked, realizes that Fleo wields a magic that only she possessed in the past. Fleo mentions that although she is a genie who grants wishes at a high cost, returning her to the castle could repeat history. Rise suggests a different solution, that Haya becomes her servant. Fleo tries to object, but Rise insists, knowing they can't trust the castle and that having a powerful genie nearby would be an advantage. Moreover, this would increase the pack's prestige. Fleo, recognizing Rise's shrewdness, reluctantly agrees. But can he really forgive Haya? Rise believes he can. Although Haya hurt her, Rise understands that her own weakness was the cause. If it doesn't bother her, there's no reason for Fleo to remain angry. So, with an outstretched hand, she offers Haya forgiveness, on the condition that she promises not to kill anyone again. Haya, overjoyed, swears loyalty to Fleo, calling him Great Supreme. Fleo, regretful for having taken things so far, is comforted by Haya, who asks him not to apologize. Meanwhile, Rise suspects that Haya might be developing other feelings, noticing how she blushes. Fleo, looking at the ruined city, considers rewinding time to restore it, but Haya stops him, warning that manipulating time could cause unforeseen accidents. Instead, Fleo uses his repair magic to fix the city while Rise watches him, her face flushed. Back home, Haya introduces herself to the girls, who panic upon realizing that a genie now lives with them. First, it was the Dark Lord, and now this. Fleo handles the situation with the same calmness with which he would adopt a stray kitten. Balirasa informs them that Haya's room is ready, but Byluri and Bolano doubt the wisdom of having a genie in the house. Balirasa, however, trusts that as long as Fleo is around, they will be safe. Later, Fleo recalls the punch he landed on Haya. Balirasa, noticing his expression, asks if he's alright. Fleo, deep in thought, apologizes for having scared her, but Balirasa assures him that he didn't. Despite his power, Fleo feels frustrated for not knowing how to handle it properly. Balirasa confesses that she also feels lost. She strives to become stronger but no longer has any enemies to face. Grateful, she tells him that thanks to him, she has learned to value what she once took for granted. Back in their room, Fleo asks Rise to rest, acknowledging that it has been a tiring day. Rise, still feeling down, grabs his arm and pulls him into bed, asking if he plans to return to his world. Fleo, surprised, asks why she says that. Rise mentions that Haya hinted he might use genie magic to return. She begs him to take her with him if he decides to leave, as she couldn't bear to be abandoned. Fleo reassures her, promising that he has no intention of going back, as his world would be too cruel for her. He promises he won't abandon her, and in a romantic gesture, he asks if she would like to be his wife for real, as he can't imagine his life without her. Rise, moved, responds that it was never a game for her, she has always been his wife. Finally, they kiss, but just as they were about to take the next step, Haya interrupts, revealing that she has been watching them since they sat on the bed. Although Fleo forbids her from spying on them, Haya responds that it is her duty to watch over her beloved supreme being at all times. Rise, blushing, warns her not to think of inappropriate things, but Haya, her face reddened, can't help it. The next day, the princess of the kingdom embarked on a tireless search to find Fleo. She took on the task personally, visiting every shop and inquiring in every corner of the realm, but she had very little luck. No one knew of anyone as strong as the one she sought. However, the princess was not willing to give up. She knew that finding Fleo was crucial for the preservation of her kingdom. Meanwhile, Fleo was enjoying an amazing feast prepared by Fenris, along with the rest of the girls. This time, Fenris had the help of Haya in the kitchen, which made it easier to prepare a larger quantity of food. However, Haya insisted on using magic to cook, an idea that didn't entirely convince Fenris, who preferred things to be done manually, especially when it came to her pack. Haya, determined to be helpful, began assisting with all the household chores, which caused concern among the girls. They feared that Haya might be able to do everything better than they could, and if they didn't put in the effort, they would end up being complete slackers. Fleo, for his part, felt uncomfortable with the fact that Haya wouldn't stop calling him Supreme One at every turn. Although he didn't want that title, to Haya, it was inconceivable that someone with Fleo's characteristics would not be named as such eternally. Clearly, Haya was a bit obsessed with him. Later, Blossom was working hard in the field, fearful that Haya might take her job away. Along with Saib, she began plowing the land, while Byluri attended to her own task. She had suggested to Fleo the idea of having carriages to transport people with their horses, but so far, she had only had time to care for them, which depressed her greatly. The horses, noticing her sadness, tried to cheer her up, but that comforting lick was a bit unsettling. Bolano, the little mage, was also sad. She had left the knights before she could become a true mage, as her family had done. Although she knew she didn't need to push herself so hard, she remembered how Fleo had spent a lot of time helping her with her spells, which had made her improve a little. She couldn't allow all that time and effort to be wasted due to a simple bout of depression. Suddenly, a loud shout from Blossom alerted all the girls, who ran to see what was happening. They quickly discovered that a magical beast was ruining their garden. To make matters worse, the beast tried to attack them, but thanks to Bolano's magic, the attack was thwarted. While Balirasa wanted to get rid of the beast as quickly as possible, Byluri had a different plan. She asked Saib to revert to her former form to calm the horse, while she, with a rope and a shovel, managed to climb onto the beast and pacify it. The rest of the girls were delighted to see that they had a true master among them. However, Byluri had another question in mind. Could they use the land of their new home? Balirasa made it clear to them that those lands did not belong to them unless they acquired them, as Fleo had done. Balirasa's insight was praiseworthy. At that moment, Fleo and Fenris were on what could almost be called a date, though in reality, they were heading to trade some equipment. Upon arriving at their new business partner, he was astonished to see that Fleo had obtained salamander skin, commenting that it would be very popular among women due to its lightness. He also suggested adding some shine with a few gems. One of these gems, a bright light stone, caught Fleo's attention. It was very unusual and valuable. Meanwhile, outside the establishment, Fenris couldn't have been prouder to have such a talented and honest man by her side. But then, a strange shadow darkened the entire city. The princess, who was very close to the location, was also overwhelmed by the darkness of the sky. Suddenly, a strange portal opened, and from it emerged a golden Asaru, who turned out to be a hero. As soon as Fleo noticed the threat, he didn't hesitate to confront the beast, as the citizens were at risk of being injured. Although this attack was aimed at the princess, the soldiers who tried to protect her were unable to do anything, being thrown into the air by a wind spell. The situation was so dangerous that Haya appeared to protect her masters, warning that the beast was actually a human, probably transformed by the sorceress who possessed his body. This sorceress was no ordinary mage. She was the Dark Mage, the most powerful in the kingdom in the past. Her greed for power had led her to use dark magic, earning her a fearsome reputation, until a hero of that time was forced to put an end to her life due to the threat she posed. However, the dark magic ensured that both her power and essence remained alive. The humans of that time, in a decision both brilliant and terrible, sealed two monsters in the same cursed place. Fenris understood that Haya was implying that, in part, it was her fault, as when she was freed, she used magic to break her own seal, which in turn released the seal of the evil sorceress. Faced with this responsibility, she asked Fleo for permission to confront the threat personally, a request that Fleo immediately granted while he and Fenris took charge of evacuating the citizens. Back with the princess, she recognized Damelina's, understanding that the sorceress was after her, as it was her ancestors who had imprisoned her, who wouldn't hold a grudge after being locked away for millennia. When Damelina's ordered her beast to attack the princess, Haya intervened and thwarted the attack. This bewildered Damelina's, who couldn't understand why a genie would care so much about a human. Despite casting a powerful spell, she also failed. The dark sorceress, enraged, declared that no power in this world could defeat her, and to prove it, she used a forbidden spell that caused her beast to grow gigantic. However, from afar, Fleo had broken the seal, neutralizing the threat. This greatly embarrassed Haya, who could not fulfill her promise. Although Haya asked for the power to end her enemy's life, Damelina's was perplexed. A mere human had neutralized her spell. Seizing the opportunity, Haya defeated the sorceress, freeing the hero from her control. Back with the princess, she finally managed to find Fleo, and introduced herself as Elizabeth Klyrode, the heir to the throne. She apologized for how her father and the former hero of the kingdom had treated him, acknowledging that he never deserved that title. Now, she offered the title of hero to Fleo, convinced that he was perfect for it, but Fleo refused the proposal once again. According to him, a true hero would not hesitate to use his power to help humanity. Besides, he had much more important things to take care of and simply wished to live in peace alongside his wife. At sunset, upon returning home, the rest of the girls were waiting for Fleo to discuss the possibility of expanding their property. Bilary wanted to capture beasts and breed them, while Blossom wanted to grow new vegetables. But the place wasn't large enough. Fenris understood that using carriages wouldn't be viable, as magical beasts would never obey a race as fragile as humans. Despite this, Fleo trusted that they could achieve it and promised to have a conversation with the landowner to reach an agreement. However, Bilary didn't want to be so direct, so the girls decided that they would pay for the land themselves. When Fleo did the calculations, he realized that they wouldn't be able to afford it, which surprised the girls upon seeing so many zeros in the figure. Fleo understood that it was normal, as, thanks to the recent purification, monsters no longer appeared, which naturally increased land prices. However, to prevent his friends from becoming discouraged, he promised to buy the land on the condition that they took care of it and also contributed 30% of their monthly earnings, which greatly cheered them up. After finalizing the purchase of the land, Fleo remembered that Blossom had mentioned her desire to grow new vegetables, so he suggested that she try more challenging varieties. This encouraged her to face new difficulties, and with Haya's help, she learned how to prepare a garden under extreme conditions. While the girls were busy, Fleo had more time to learn about farming. Although he initially felt a bit overwhelmed, with the help of Bilary and Fenris, he became an expert, and they even bought horses to transport the vegetables and deliver them to the nearest markets. Everything was going smoothly, and finally, both Fleo and his friends could live in peace, although they knew they would have to face more challenges in the future. On the other hand, another person was living a different reality. The blonde hero and his slave were arrested and are scheduled to be executed. Balirasa wore an impressive dress, black as the darkest night, accentuating her slender figure. As she gazed at her reflection, she couldn't comprehend why she was wearing it. Confusion took hold of her mind when Ulamina's, with an enigmatic expression, bestowed blessings upon her. This only deepened her bewilderment, plunging her into a sea of unanswered questions. Suddenly, Gaul appeared on the scene, unleashing a new wave of confusion. The Dark King, with a smile verging on the sinister, longed for the night to arrive soon for their honeymoon. Balirasa, even more stunned, realized that she had awoken in what seemed to be her own wedding, a surprise wedding of which she had no prior knowledge. The air in the Dark Kingdom grew thick and suffocating as multiple demons surrounded her, flattering her with wishes of a long life, as if they were already celebrating her marriage to Gaul. The Dark King promised to lay the world at her feet, ensuring that he accepted the marriage. But Balirasa knew all too well that this could mean the end of the world. She quickly tried to stop the ceremony before it was too late. But Gaul, in an unexpected gesture, took her in his arms and kissed her, sealing what seemed to be her fate. Fortunately, it was all a horrendous dream. Balirasa woke up with a start, her heart racing. The relief was brief, as she knew she would not only have to endure Gaul's presence in the real world but also in her cursed dreams. Anguish consumed her, and the thought of facing him both in waking life and in her nightmares made her feel trapped in a spiral of despair. The following morning, Balirasa and Fenris decided to distract themselves by practicing muffin making. However, Fenris quickly noticed that Balirasa wasn't well. The blonde, trying to shake off the unease, told her friend about the terrible dream she had had. Fenris, concerned, suggested that perhaps she was in love, as for wolves, dreams reflect the deepest inner feelings. Wedding dreams, in particular, are often a sign of infatuation, which terrified Balirasa even more, as the last thing she wanted was any kind of connection with the Dark Lord. The conversation between Balirasa and Fenris didn't go unnoticed by the rest of the girls in the group, including Haya, who were eager to find out who the blonde was in love with. Gaul, being the main suspect, became the target of teasing and speculation. Despite Balirasa's efforts to assure them that she would never join him, the girls insisted that she should give him a chance, reminding her that even Fenris had fallen in love with a human like Fleo. The story of Fenris and Fleo began to surface. Wolves choose their mates through battle, and when Fenris and Fleo first met, the tension between them was such that a fight inevitably broke out. After the battle, although neither was injured, Fenris felt an inner need to help Fleo. As Fenris recounted her story, Fleo, without them noticing at first, was listening, making the situation a bit awkward for the wolf. Meanwhile, Fleo's system issued an alert. One of the magical barriers had been destroyed. The girls wanted to rush into battle immediately, but Fleo, more cautious, suggested investigating first, as it seemed someone was trying to deactivate it from outside. A demon was observing the barrier with interest. While in the royal castle, the princess's messenger mentioned that most of the gold coins Fleo donated appeared in Rhodes' registry. The princess, lost in thought, recalled the exact moment when, after rejecting her request to become the kingdom's new hero, Fleo gave her a bag full of coins to help the innocents who had lost their homes. It was strange that Fleo had Rhodes coins, as ordinary people couldn't afford them. The messenger suggested that perhaps he had obtained the coins from someone named Benaza, which led the princess to remember the young man who had gone to the demon forest, destined to perish because of her father. Gradually, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, and the messengers started to suspect that the exiled Benaza was now the same Fleo. The princess, deeply remorseful for the harm they had caused him, wished to at least apologize to him, seeking forgiveness that she knew she might never receive. However, her troubles did not end there. A soldier arrived with news that the former hero and his assistant had mysteriously disappeared from prison, leaving the princess with no choice but to order an immediate search. The pain in her heart was unbearable, knowing that she had supported a terrible hero and had failed to protect Fleo in the past. Meanwhile, outside the castle, the soldiers desperately searched for the fugitives, who knew that if they were caught again, they would have no chance of seeing the light of day. But these condemned ones did not leave empty-handed. The hero took what he considered his payment for enduring so much nonsense for so long, only to discover that the bag he carried contained not gold, but infinite water and a treasure chest. Desperate to find something of value, he opened the chest, only to find an enchanted shovel. The noise they made attracted the soldiers back, but the shovel, capable of digging meters in a second, saved them from being captured. Now, however, they were trapped underground, with no idea how to get out. Back in the Dark Kingdom, Gaul, growing increasingly impatient, wanted to know if they had located Fleo. Ulaminas, with a frustrated expression, informed him that they had been unable to find him. Gaul knew well that teleportation only allowed travel to places previously visited, so Fleo couldn't have gone far. However, Ulaminas believed it was the perfect time to attack the human kingdom, rather than wasting time searching for a mere human. To Gaul, this idea was madness, as he didn't want to risk losing more of his subjects in a pointless war. Although the purification had been launched, Gaul knew that sacrificing his own demons served no real purpose. Determined to find Fleo, Gaul ignored Ulaminas's objections, but their conversation wasn't private. A demoness overheard them from the shadows and rushed to inform Uigard, Gaul's brother. Uegard, enraged upon hearing that his brother wanted to align a human with the demons, decided it was time to dethrone him. In his mind, Gaul was no longer fit to be king. Meanwhile, in the human kingdom, Fleo and Fenris finished buying ingredients and noticed something strange in the city. Although everything seemed calm, they decided to go for lunch together, but on the way, they encountered Holdy, an old friend of Fleo. Holdy, with sadness, told them she was closing her shop, as with her advanced age and the loss of her best supplier in a demon attack, she could no longer continue her business. This news deeply affected Fenris, who had never thought about ordinary people and the consequences of war. Fleo, in a gentle tone, assured her that life was full of ups and downs, and that the emergence of new businesses was proof of human perseverance. Just as they were about to enter the restaurant, Ballyrossa appeared, wishing to invite them to lunch to celebrate her recent promotion in adventurer rank. Although Fenris preferred a quiet meal alone with Fleo, she accepted Ballyrossa's invitation, recognizing her gesture of gratitude. However, their peace was interrupted when Haya arrived with urgent news. A mysterious being was approaching to attack them. They all prepared for battle, only to discover that it was the Dark King himself, Gaul, who was also invited to join them for lunch. During the meal, Gaul, in a relaxed manner, commented on how much he enjoyed human food, which always surprised him for being so delicious and colorful. As they spoke, Fleo recalled how he had met Ballyrossa in the past. Ballyrossa, for her part, couldn't help but feel a spark of hope, believing that if the Dark King could appreciate human food, perhaps he could also learn to appreciate other things from their world. But she knew she couldn't let her guard down. Gaul was, after all, a formidable enemy, one she had sworn to defeat, even though he was now sharing a meal with them. A few days later, during breakfast, the atmosphere at the table was filled with anticipation. The meal prepared by Fenris shone with a special allure. The vibrant colors and intoxicating aroma filled the room, capturing everyone's attention. As they took the first bite, their senses were overwhelmed by a mix of exquisite flavors, and the surprise was evident on their faces. It was clear that Fenris's culinary skills had reached a new level, and although she remained modest, she couldn't hide the pride she felt. She attributed her success to the teachings of her cooking teacher, whom she had recently visited in Hado to express her gratitude. This reunion not only allowed her to thank her teacher but also led her to learn a special dish, one that was perfect for families and, according to her teacher, was a favorite among children. As Fenris reflected on the lessons she had received, Milno warmly congratulated her, noting that her teacher was now married. This awakened a mix of emotions in Fenris. As being a wolf, she understood that being married implied the possibility of becoming pregnant at any time. This thought made her blush, and the girls at the table exchanged knowing looks, aware of what this new stage in their friend's life entailed. At that moment, a knock at the door interrupted their thoughts. Upon opening it, they found the princess, who, despite previously rejecting Fleo's offer, had returned with a different attitude. She had come to apologize, referring to him as Benaza, which caused surprise among those present. Shortly after, the princess was invited inside, and Ballyrossa served her a cup of tea, while apologizing for the modesty of the welcome, considering her status. The princess, however, had something important to discuss with Fleo, although Fenris was reluctant to leave them alone. Concerned about how the kingdom had treated her husband in the past, Fleo took her hand, conveying calmness, and allowed the others to leave, except for Fenris. The princess, sensing the tension, lowered her head in respect before kneeling before Fleo. She apologized again for the injustices he had suffered, recalling the spells of the bottomless bag they had given him as a reward and the sending him to Delevza. Fleo, however, remained firm, reminding her that he was no longer Benaza, but simply a humble merchant, albeit a powerful one. Despite the apologies, he had no intention of taking action and asked the princess to get straight to the point. Being caught, the princess handed him a map of the kingdom, capable of indicating the location of her army and the magical stones of the leaders of each unit. Fleo immediately understood the importance and sensitivity of this information. The princess explained that the effects of the purification would soon wear off, allowing the Dark Army to advance once again. The kingdom's mages were exhausted from the previous purification and had not yet recovered, forcing them to take advantage of the geographical advantages to deploy their troops, leaving some cities unprotected. Desperate, she asked Fleo for help in protecting those cities, although she knew her request was selfish. Fenris, outraged, intervened, accusing the princess of trying to involve her husband in a war, despite everything he had been through. The princess revealed that the king had been bedridden since the purification, and that when he awoke, he might send troops after Fleo due to his connection with the demons. She, on the other hand, wanted to ascend to the throne to save her people, willing to take drastic measures to prove she was up to the king's authority. Fenris, furious, accused her of wanting to use her husband to gain power, but Fleo calmed her, understanding that the princess only wanted to ensure that he wouldn't join the Dark Army. As Fleo pondered his response, elsewhere in the kingdom, some adventurers were searching for the hero and Suya. However, their incompetence prevented them from realizing they had them right by their side. The situation grew even more tense when a spider caught them in its web, the pet of Uigard's assistant. The demoness, upon meeting the hero, decided he would make a worthy sacrifice. Back with Fleo and Fenris, the night brought a moment of reflection. Fenris, restless, wondered why they were still sleeping apart, while Fleo meditated on what he should do in that world. If they ever had children, he wished for them to live happily among humans and demons, determined to create such a world. The next day, in a small village, the people began to evacuate quickly at the sight of the Dark Army. A little girl, who was in the forest gathering nuts, was caught off guard by a horde of monsters, but Fenris and a masked Fleo arrived just in time to save her, creating a barrier to hold back the creatures and allow the girl to escape. Although willing to help, Fenris questioned Fleo's decision to take on a job without a reward, reminding him that accepting money would make him a mercenary. Despite Fenris's confusion, Fleo remained firm in his decision. The situation grew more complicated when a huge Cyclops appeared, determined to destroy the barrier. This Cyclops, the strongest in the Dark Army, began insulting Fenris for supporting a mere human, dismissing the strength of the wolves. Fenris's anger grew, and although Fleo wasn't entirely in agreement, he accepted her desire to confront the Cyclops, asking her not to kill it. The ensuing battle was intense. Fenris used all her skills, displaying a masterful tactic that left the Cyclops pinned to the ground, defeated but alive. Although the Cyclops tried to belittle her methods, Fenris retorted that he was still breathing thanks to the insolence of the humans. However, when the Cyclops ordered the monsters to attack, Fleo easily trapped them and healed everyone's wounds, insisting that they leave peacefully. The Cyclops, confused, asked Fleo who he was, and he replied that he was just a human, a friend of the demons, willing to fight them if they didn't leave in peace. Terrified, the monsters decided to retreat. Fenris, relieved, embraced Fleo, who still felt a bit embarrassed by the confrontation, though he knew they were doing the right thing. The villagers arrived to thank them, but upon seeing Fenris, they wondered what a wolf was doing in that place. Fleo explained that they needn't worry about her, as she was his companion. Meanwhile, in the capital, the princess received reports that a mysterious adventurer was driving the Dark Army out of various regions. Accompanied by a silver-haired wolf and covering his face with a wolf mask, this adventurer only drove off the Dark Army and left without identifying himself. The advisor and the princess realized it must be Fleo, and the advisor ordered that he be given assistance if he was seen with the silver-haired wolf. On the other hand, in the Dark Realm, Gaul observed from a distance, wondering how his brother dared to act without his orders. Meanwhile, a demon arrived with the news that Ulaminas had reported an insurrection led by Lord Uigard. He appeared to be preparing a secret ritual to achieve victory by sacrificing humans with high stats. Uigard, eager, was rushing towards the Dark Realm, while his brother awaited his arrival with impatience. Fleo and Fenris were enjoying a peaceful tea when Gaul joined them with an unexpected request. He wished to live in their home temporarily and at no cost. This request surprised Fleo, who, intrigued, asked for the reason behind such an unusual plea. Gaul, initially reluctant, eventually decided to share his story. In a flashback, Gaul recalled how he had received alarming news from Greenel about the impending rebellion that Uigard was organizing in the Demon Realm. He learned that Uigard had been bribing the throne room, seeking to destabilize his leadership. Shocked, Gaul set off towards the realm to confront this threat. Meanwhile, Ulaminas, one of Gaul's subordinates, scolded the four Infernos for betraying their lord. They defended their actions, arguing that they were trying to shake Gaul out of his world of fantasies, given that he had been shirking his duties as leader of the demon army, staying away from the castle, and neglecting the conquest. The situation in the demon realm was growing increasingly tense. Ulaminas, disgusted by the attitude of the four Infernos, confronted them, reminding them of all the times Gaul had protected the army in various situations. However, the loyalty of these subordinates seemed to waver, especially Yormanit, who, although recognizing Gaul as the only one worthy of the throne, considered it time to act harshly against those who intended to rebel. The outcome of this confrontation was not long in coming. Everyone present headed to the audience with Uegard, where Fufun announced that the throne room would soon belong to their new leader. At that moment, Ulaminas, outraged by the betrayal, tried to attack Uegard but was easily repelled. Gaul appeared on the scene, and his presence changed the dynamic. Despite the provocations, Gaul made it clear that he did not seek conflict, asking his followers if he had committed any act that warranted being considered an offense. The response was a mixture of dissatisfied murmurs. Disappointed, Gaul decided to remove the ring that symbolized his power and handed it to Uegard, thus renouncing the throne of the Dark Lord. This act surprised everyone, especially when Uegard tried to attack him in a fit of rage. Gaul, however, demonstrated his power with a simple kick that sent Uegard flying out of the castle. The four Infernos, realizing their mistake, begged him not to abandon his position as king. But Gaul was resolute. He had given all his money to his subordinates as severance pay and was now in search of a new beginning. Fleo, though willing to help, needed to consult with the others. Balirasa, who had just arrived, was left speechless upon seeing the former Dark Lord in her home. Fleo suggested that Gaul and his group stay temporarily, but Balirasa, terrified, didn't know how to respond. Meanwhile, Gaul tried to convince her of the advantages of living together, but her fear was evident. Finally, everyone gathered to discuss the situation. Gaul, now without the throne, didn't have many human friends to turn to, except for Fleo. He explained that he had never agreed with his predecessor's methods and that, although he had usurped the throne, he had done so with the intention of improving things. However, seeing the lack of support from the other demons, he decided to abdicate. Balirasa, although understanding the situation, remained wary, unable to forget the battles and the losses suffered at the hands of the demons. Fleo, understanding her feelings, reminded her that not all demons were enemies and that, like humans, they too had their internal struggles. Balirasa, still reluctant, accepted the situation on the condition that Gaul and his group would not harm any human. Grateful, Gaul promised to keep his word. As the days passed, Gaul tried to integrate into life in Fleo's home. He offered his help with various tasks, although his attempts were not always well received. Despite his efforts, his presence continued to create tension. However, Fleo valued the cohabitation and sought ways to maintain peace among everyone. Finally, Balirasa, still uncertain, confronted Gaul and Ulaminas, warning them that if they harmed any human, they would have to face her. Gaul, far from being offended, thanked her for her honesty, although Balirasa made it clear that she would only shake their hand the day they earned her trust. With this promise, she retreated to the forest with Saib, while the rest of the household tried to adapt to this new and strange cohabitation. Elsewhere, the former hero was fleeing with Tsuya, exhausted but determined to reach the realm with a bag full of treasures stolen from the castle. Unbeknownst to them, their fate was linked to the events unfolding in Fleo's home, where demons and humans were attempting to coexist in a tense but fragile harmony. As Uegard paced through the hall, a growing frustration consumed him. How is it possible that we always end up defeated? He thought, casting inquisitive glances towards Fufun, expecting a convincing explanation. She, aware of his mood, cautiously informed him that reports indicated the humans had laid traps along the Dark Army's route, hindering their advance towards Klyrode. Uegard clenched his fists upon hearing that mere traps had been enough to stop his mighty army. He couldn't fathom how something so insignificant could stand in the way of his victory. He decided that the only way to ensure triumph was to crush them with an even larger army, so colossal that the humans wouldn't have time to react. Fufun, with a trembling voice, asked how he planned to create an army of such magnitude, but before she could finish, Uegard struck her with a gesture of impatience. "Your job is to figure out where the hell to find soldiers," he snapped, warning her to come up with an effective plan for the next attack. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Hugi Mugi and the rest of the Infernos were discussing among themselves. None of them were surprised that Uegard kept failing. His focus on advancing without a clear strategy was a recipe for disaster. Meanwhile, in a completely different setting, Fenris ran to embrace Fleo with enthusiasm. She had won a ticket to a hot spring and was excited at the thought of a trip together. However, the worker informed her that the ticket was valid for a minimum of 3 people and a maximum of 15. Fenris, disappointed that she couldn't enjoy an intimate moment with her husband, asked if they could exchange the prize. But upon finding it wasn't possible, she resigned herself with a mixture of frustration and acceptance. On the other hand, Gaul and the others were strolling through the streets, noticing the large number of people who, despite being in a remote area, were gathering around them. Ulaminas noticed that everyone was dressed strangely, which Balirasa explained was because they were wearing yukatas, traditional attire from an eastern country. Fenris was still lamenting not being able to enjoy her beloved husband alone, but Fleo consoled her, reminding her that the company of Gaul and Ulaminas would allow them to get to know them better. Despite her disappointment, Fenris decided to enjoy the trip, and upon hearing some girls talking about the fertility benefits of hot springs, her mood changed completely. Now, she had a new goal, to give her husband a small Fleo Jr. Upon arriving in Kinosaki, an elderly woman welcomed them and handed them their yukatas so they could change and begin the tour. Fenris stealthily approached one of the workers and whispered which of the hot springs enhanced fertility. The worker, with a smile, indicated that it was the Yanagi bath, located outdoors, and handed her a map while wishing her good luck. Fenris, though embarrassed, was determined to achieve her goal of becoming pregnant. Elsewhere in the complex, the girls headed to a room to change, but Blossom, distracted, stumbled into Uegard, who was disguised as a human. Uegard glared at her, but Fufun intervened, reminding him that they were there to boost the army's morale after the defeat, and causing a scene would only ruin their plans. Reluctantly, Uegard held his tongue, though the fury still burned within him. Meanwhile, the four Infernos, also disguised, were parading around boasting about how much they planned to enjoy the trip. Fufun reminded them that they needed to wear the collar that nullified malice, and after doing so, Gaul and Ulaminas realized that they were officers of the Dark Army. Fenris warned them not to be seen to avoid causing a scene, though Gaul didn't understand why they had to hide. Fenris explained that if Uegard were to see him, he wouldn't have anything nice to say, and if they ruined her trip, she would personally make them suffer. Later, the girls were enjoying the warm and relaxing surroundings, while Fenris clung to Fleo, excited at the idea of sleeping in a separate room with him. However, Fleo mentioned to Gaul that he had reserved another room for them, to which Gaul replied that it wasn't necessary, as he could have stayed in the same room with the girls. This didn't sit well with Balirasa or Ulaminas, but Blossom intervened, suggesting that they enjoy the trip that Fleo had arranged for them. With everyone scattered in different areas, Fenris seized the opportunity to invite Fleo to the Yanagi bath. However, when one of the girls wanted to join them, Fenris stopped her, determined that nothing and no one would interrupt her plan to conceive a child with Fleo. Still puzzled by his wife's sudden mood swings, Fleo suggested they all have dinner together after relaxing, a proposal everyone accepted. As Fenris dragged Fleo towards the Yanagi bath, Haya accessed her own mind, where she encountered Ulaminas, who asked if she had forgotten about her. Haya responded that such a thing was impossible, as her soul would always be with her, and taking advantage of the moment, hinted that she wished to have a bit of fun with Melinas. As she cornered her, she confessed her curiosity about human reproduction, but when she tried to advance, Melinas, breaking out in a cold sweat, reminded her that such an act was only possible with someone one loved, and that they were both women, so it was forbidden to do it with the same gender. Haya, however, reminded her that she was a being transcendent of genders, attracted to all that was ambitious. Despite her attempts, Ulaminas expelled Haya from her own mind, understanding that both must agree to such an act. Back with Fenris and Fleo, they arrived at the Yanagi bath, where Fenris, excited, asked Fleo to shower her with affection. Fleo, though he tried to oblige, realized they were in the women's bath, and in a scene change, we see him relaxing in the hot springs, reflecting that it was the first time he could do so in that world. In a moment of calm, Fleo proposed to Fenris that they plan a trip just for the two of them, as they had never had a honeymoon. Fenris, delighted with the idea, could only think about how they hadn't been able to share baths, which frightened Fleo, making him leave quickly. Elsewhere, Bilary had declined the invitation from Balirasa, and the others, choosing instead to head to the Adults Museum. Just as she was about to open the door, Haya appeared behind her, commenting that, according to rumors, there were intriguing artifacts from all eras in that museum. With a mix of nerves and curiosity, Haya pushed her inside, and both were delighted with what they found. Later, they were seen drinking in a bar, where Blossom, a bit tipsy, told Balirasa to stop glancing covertly at Gaul and, if she liked him, to tell him directly. Balirasa, blushing, denied the insinuation, claiming she was just keeping an eye on him. Seeing them so relaxed, Gaul remarked that Balirasa looked especially beautiful in her yukata, which made Ulaminas jealous, though she tried to hide it. Blossom, noticing the tension, invited them all to have a drink with her, while we returned to the Infernos, who were eating unsatisfied, finding human food disgusting. As the tension increased, Uegard, fed up with the atmosphere, began to control the accumulated malice, unleashing chaos that only intensified when the collar nullifying malice was accidentally knocked off. In the distance, the false hero and Suya, desperate to escape, stumbled upon a stone brimming with dark energy. The stone transformed the hero into a giant monster, unleashing a new battle. Back with Ulaminas and Balirasa, the tension between them escalated as they argued over Gaul's situation. Ulimenas, enraged, made it clear that Balirasa could no longer get closer to Gaul, to which Balirasa retorted that she would do as she pleased. The confrontation between the two was cut short when Uigard, ignoring the situation, began preparing his next move to attack the humans. In an unexpected twist, Uigard, furious over the constant defeats, decided to lead an even larger army to crush the humans. Meanwhile, Fenris remained determined to accomplish her mission, despite the tensions and conflicts looming ahead, as it must be assumed that Gaul is about to face a tough battle with his brother. Balirasa runs desperately, worried about the confrontation she has witnessed between Gaul and Uigard. She knows the situation is critical, so she quickly searches for Fleo to inform him. Meanwhile, Plon is evacuating people from the area as the danger is imminent. Gaul easily deflects Uigard's attacks with surprising ease. Frustrated by the ineffectiveness of his assaults, Uigard decides to control a monster and sends it to attack Ulimenas. However, Ulimenas stops it without any trouble, which only enrages Uigard further. The tension is palpable, and though Fleo tries to prevent a greater disaster, Balirasa finds him and informs him that a monster has suddenly appeared, destroying everything in its path. Additionally, she tells him that Gaul and his cohorts have infiltrated the inn as guests. Although concerned, Fleo feels reassured knowing that Ulimenas is there to handle any inconvenience. However, Gaul realizes that his attacks are becoming increasingly powerful, and he must be cautious of the malice Uigard controls, as it could overpower them all. Ulimenas decides that the best way to resolve the situation is to distance the humans from the demonic gem. Fenris, seeking revenge for ruining her trip with her beloved, uses a close-range teleportation spell and casts divine punishment on the hero, completely expelling him from the demonic malice. Meanwhile, Zoya, who is about to fall, is saved by Gaul, who had promised not to harm any human. Uigard, refusing to give up, follows Gaul, who asks if he has no intention of surrendering. Uigard arrogantly responds that he will eat, drink, and destroy whatever he wants, for demons like him live by following their instincts. With a fist charged with magic, Uigard attacks Gaul, but he skillfully dodges, remaining cautious now that he has obtained the Dark Lord's power. Elsewhere, Ulimenas interrogates the four Infernos about why they have allied with Uigard. They, with no intention of fighting, claim they just wanted to relax and observe. Foon, on the other hand, irritates the little cat, declaring that no one will stand in the way of her dear Lord Uigard's goals. Fufun uses his spider to attack Ulimenas, but he dodges and lunges at the perverted Four Eyes. To Gaul, the battle is nothing more than a game. He easily blocks Uigard's attacks and counters with his magic. Jigger, realizing this, increases his power and starts striking rapidly. Though Gaul is only focused on defending himself, his brother accuses him of having lost his innate aggression. In response, Gaul inflicts considerable damage with a headbutt and demands that he entertain him a bit more. When Uigard tries to use his malice, Gaul informs him that he has sealed it, leaving him practically human. Uigard, incredulous, had never heard of such a spell. Gaul explains that it is a human spell that he perfected and used to overthrow the former Dark Lord, who was leading the Dark Realm to its destruction. This enrages Uigard as he sees his malice sealed by a mere human technique. Meanwhile, the inn workers observe the battle. The elderly woman in charge mentions that they have no choice but to use a special talisman that immobilizes all demons. Fufun, oddly, enjoys this, while the elderly woman warns them that they are disturbing other guests and must be expelled. The talisman's magic transports the demons elsewhere, leaving Gaul and Ulimenas surprised by its power. After the battle, Fenris repeatedly slaps the false hero, and Balirasa warns that they should move away, as Fleo will cast a spell to repair the entire place. Upon hearing this, Fenris stops hitting the hero and retreats. With a single spell, Fleo instantly repairs the inn, leaving everyone astonished. Meanwhile, the inn workers, now relieved, chase the false hero and Suga. The hero tries to hide by digging a huge hole but ends up being expelled by a water vein he uncovers. The inn, for its part, is left gleaming as it was at the beginning, and the elderly woman thanks Gaul for his help. Gaul, about to apologize, is interrupted by the cat girl, who silences him to prevent him from getting into more trouble. The elderly woman asks everyone to enjoy the hot springs, as the staff will do their best to serve them. Uigard, excited, finally relaxes, while later that night, Fenris reflects on her husband's fertility. Balirasa, for her part, covers the fierce cat's body while Damalinas scolds Haya for being in the women's bath, suspecting she is jealous. Later, Fleo and Gaul listen as the girls have fun and joke about the relaxing effect of the hot springs. Gaul comments that he never imagined bathing alongside the former Dark Lord, But after meeting Fleo, he realizes that he is an interesting person. Gaul admires Fleo's calmness in his presence and his desire to create peace between humans and demons. Fleo, for his part, feels strange, knowing that although he possesses great power, it will never be enough to eliminate the world's conflicts. Gaul asks him what he thinks is necessary to change the world, but Fleo has no answer. He only knows that he must rely on his friends to do everything within his power. Satisfied with Fleo's response, Gaul offers his help, becoming his trusted companion. Later, they enjoy a grand feast prepared by the elderly woman, and everyone goes to bed, except for Fleo and Fenris, who enjoy a moment alone. The next day, Fenris is in a very good mood, and the girls notice that something has happened. Fleo teleports them back to the city, where they continue with their daily activities. Bolano, nervous but excited, gives her first class, while Haya helps Blossom with the harvest. Later, Fleo teaches Gaul how to use a bow, and Balirasa approaches to thank him for the armor he made for her. Uluminas, jealous, growls and changes the subject, mentioning that the princess's coronation will be later. Gaul assures her that due to his magic, Uegard will take a while to recover, so there will be no problems during the event. Finally, during the coronation, the new queen orders the search for her father to continue, while reflecting on not wasting the opportunity Fleo has given her to rebuild the kingdom. On the other hand, the false hero is still being sought, but he and Tsuya are hiding, waiting for the day he is recognized as the true hero. As everyone prepares to eat, Fleo mentions to Fenris that he plans to open a shop to sell his sweets, and together they begin to dream about how to make it grow. Their vision of a world where humans and demons can live in peace continues to take shape, step by step. And with that, our anime comes to an end.